So I was buying this property for 78,000. My conservative valuation on it was that it would be worth about 135, 130, 135. And with no work needed, that seemed like a really good opportunity to just add something to the portfolio, really, and try and extract the money that had gone in to buy it originally.
Okay,
Effectively a no money down deal.
we've got some great questions in a second, actually, on exactly how financing and refinancing of that works. But I wanted to ask, was this an in the room purchase or an online auction or?
Online. So this was an online one again because of the time constraints that I have, and I like to work efficiently on my property stuff. It was an online auction, and there was very little interest in the auction. Primarily, I assume because of the way the advert was worded and the perhaps lack of understanding of what the details of the lease were, but also because of this area of the market. Like I say, it could be quite difficult to finance these, and do you really want to buy it for cash and hold as an investment? A lot of people don't, I think.
Okay. And so you said you paid 78,000 for it, and then we got some costs on top of that, some other bits and pieces.
Yeah.
Was it that a cash purchase, or were you using sort of auction finance on that?
Yeah. So I think what might be helpful is to tell you what my intended strategy was. Yeah, because I wouldn't entertain any deal without knowing what's coming next and what the agenda is for that deal later down the line. So when I looked at this property, because of my area of work and expertise, and that we focus with a lot of complex stuff, I knew we could finance this if we needed to finance this, and I knew that I had a lender who would value it at what it's worth on the market, but that I just needed to kind of break that chain first. And the way to break the chain was really to either buy it for cash and then do a mortgage later, or buy it on a bridge and do a mortgage later. And I was in a good position that we had enough cash to be able to do that. So this was a cash purchase, with the intention to then try and get that money back.
Okay. And now I think I'm reasonably informed in property, and I would at this point I'd be thinking, well, how am I going to get a lender to value this at the end valuation that I'm looking at? Well, I know neighbouring properties have sold it, let's say 135 or there or thereabouts, but I've not added value to this. I've spent 150 quid fixing a leak,
Yeah.
and I think probably at that point I would be thinking it's going to be really difficult for me to refinance at the improved value because I'm not demonstrating that I've forced the appreciation of the asset. Now that is definitely my limitation on understanding, and where someone like you will know, well, actually, there are lenders here that will value it at the true market valuation. So, is that a limited pool of lenders, or how does that work?
And look, you're 100% right, Ant. Generally, if we understand what the backdrop is to this, it's perhaps helpful. Thinking about that credit crunch again, 2007, 2008, before that happened, generally the way that many property investors acquired huge portfolios was by buying a property on Monday and remortgaging it on Wednesday for a higher amount because it was assumed that the market had gone up by 10% in 3 days, and therefore they were pulling money out left, right, and center. And if a new property came along, they leveraged that against the other ones that they had because all of those have gone up by 10% now in 2 weeks as well. And this is how they accumulated these huge portfolios by allowing this to happen. Now, after that financial meltdown that we all know about, that was curbed, that was stopped, and it wasn't allowed to happen anymore. And they kind of called it a day one remortgage, is the phrase in our world, what it's called, or some people call it a back to back remortgage. But effectively, what that means is getting a property and um, um, doing no work to it, but yet refinancing it at a higher value within a 6 month period. So those were the rules. It said, well, if you're going to buy a property, you need to wait at least 6 months before you can mortgage it, and we'll consider the market value. If you do it within those 6 months, yes, there are some lenders who will, but we will only look at the purchase price that you paid. We will assume there is no growth on it unless you've done work to it. put some money in and shown us that you've increased that value. So that's kind of the backdrop, and that was the case for quite a while. But nothing is absolute, and our job is very much to work in the cracks and find the solutions for the investors. And there are lenders who will allow that to happen. There are not a huge amount of them, but there's a couple of lenders out there where what you can do is you can buy a property. Let's say you buy it for cash, and then literally the same day or the next day or the next week or whenever you want, you can mortgage that property at the current market value without doing any work.
Transform your property results, one insight at a time, at ypn.plus.